Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. My name is Tara Kalk. I'm the project coordinator of the Southeast Mental Health Technology Transfer Center on the School Mental Health Initiative. We are very excited to present to you session 4 of our Classroom-Wise Learning Series. Some of you are familiar faces, but welcome those of you who are new here. Just a quick reminder, if you have audio or technical issues during the session, the chat box is open for you to communicate with our team so we can assist you. If you have any links to resources or documents that you'd like to share with other attendees, or if you have any questions for the presenters, please enter those into the chat box as well. And I'd like to give you a quick background on the MHTTC. So today's session is brought to you by the Southeast Mental Health Technology Transfer Center, or the MHTTC for short. And our team is the School Mental Health Initiative. We are located in Atlanta, Georgia at the Emory University Rollins School of Public Health. And we are proud to serve 8 states in HHS Region 4. You can see those 8 states pictured here in blue. Our center includes faculty and staff with expertise in public health programs, finance, policy, and health systems. And this provides us a unique lens through which we can address mental health priorities in our region. The goal of our center is to accelerate the adoption of evidence-based mental health programs and practices by providing training and technical assistance to Region 4. We do have a quick disclaimer as well. This presentation was prepared for the MHTTC network under a cooperative agreement from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, or SAMHSA. And the opinions expressed in this learning session are the views of our moderator and panelists and do not reflect the official position of the Department of Health and Human Services, or SAMHSA. And now I'm very happy to introduce Dr. Elizabeth Connors. She is an assistant professor at Yale University and a faculty member with the University of Maryland National Center for School Mental Health. Dr. Connors received her PhD in clinical child and community psychology, and her work focuses on improving access to high-quality mental health promotion, prevention, and intervention services, and supports for underserved youth and their families in critical access points such as schools and community settings. And I'm going to hand it over to you, Elizabeth.
Thank you so much, Tara. We are so excited to have you all calling in to learn about Classroom-Wise today. I'm so pleased to be with you again. Some of you may be returning if you've attended other Classroom-Wise sessions this summer, and if so, welcome back. I also know that a number of you who registered, this may be your very first Classroom-Wise session. So wherever you are in terms of your knowledge of this resource, we welcome you, and we're excited to talk with you about modules 4 and 5 specifically today. Our goal is to really increase your understanding of modules 4 and 5, really giving you a sneak peek. Many of you are mental health providers or consultants, or not even necessarily teachers who would be the recipients of the modules. So we want to kind of give you a look behind the curtain, and you can kind of understand what these modules include. Our goal is to make sure that you've got some best practices to effectively support adoption and implementation in your local school systems. And we always want to promote cross-state networking and shared learning about best practices. So we see this as a learning community opportunity. So if you have ideas or questions or suggestions for one another, we encourage that participation on the call. You can unmute and share aloud or type in the chat at any point throughout the office hours today. So before we get started, just want to welcome you again. If you have not yet typed in the chat box to introduce yourself, please do so now. We would love to know your name, your organization, and your state. If you're with a local school district or local school system, please include that. It's so helpful for us to know who's on. These sessions are designed for the Southeast region, but we always have folks joining us from other parts of the US and territories, which is so exciting. So wherever you're calling in from, you're very welcomed, and we're so happy to have you. If you do have video capabilities and you can enable that and we can see your faces, we would appreciate that. So please feel welcomed onto video with us today. So for those of you who've been with us before, welcome back. And for those of you who are new, I'm going to do a really quick 5-minute recap of what ClassroomWise is before we dive into new material. Just want to make sure that everyone has kind of a basic grounding and understanding of the resource that we're referring to today. Tara actually sent out just prior to this call a link to an introduction, 6-minute introduction video that can be found right on the ClassroomWise website. So if you are not as familiar with ClassroomWise yet, please feel free to check that out. Basically, this is a free, in the public domain, free of charge, 3-part training package. The core of it is really an online course that's designed for educators to take a training in mental health. It offers also a video library and resource collection right on the website there. And it offers evidence-based strategies and skills for teachers to engage and support students with mental health concerns in the classroom. So the self-paced online course takes about 5 hours to complete in total, and it's 6 different modules. This was developed by the SAMHSA-funded Mental Health Technology Transfer Center Network in partnership with the National Center for School Mental Health at the University of Maryland. So feel free to go over to classroomwise.org right now if you haven't yet already, and start poking around and checking it out while we're on the call today. As I mentioned, there's an introduction video that's right on the website, so please check that out. This is a really nice overview. And also, if you're in the position of sharing with your colleagues what ClassroomWise includes and what it is after this call, please use this video as part of your elevator pitch. So don't feel like you've got to retell it in your own words. This video is right there for you. It's 6 minutes long, and you can just play it as part of sort of a meeting or a briefing to discuss ClassroomWise implementation for your local schools. So in terms of the online course, which I mentioned is really kind of the central piece of the ClassroomWise package, it is 6 modules, it is self-paced, it's designed to equip educators with information and strategies to promote mental health and well-being of students. And you can see a list of the 6 modules here. Essentially, modules 1 through 3 focus on promoting mental health and well-being of all students. You can kind of think about that as your universal mental health promotion strategies for everybody. Modules 4 through 6 really dive into understanding and supporting students experiencing adversity and distress. So if you think a little bit more about that tier 2, tier 3 layer of support, and students needing a little bit additional supports in the classroom, that's really a quick way to think about modules 4 through 6. So to take the ClassroomWise course, you start at the website, and when you launch it, it's going to take you over to a Healthy Knowledge website where you can go ahead and log in, register, and access the training course itself. And this is what the landing page looks like when you get to the course. So if you need more information on this, we've done some more in detail sort of introductions, more like a 15-minute introduction, and that has all been recorded and is on the Southeast MHTTC website. So if you want to refer back to a little bit more of a detailed explanation of ClassroomWise and how to get there, please feel free to do so. 2 questions we get a lot. One is about certificate of completion. So there is a certificate of completion for 5 contact hours that's available once the course is completed. These are not discipline-specific CEUs, but rather is a certificate of completion that can be shown to your school leadership or your district leadership to show that you've completed the course. You do need to take the modules in order. So you have to have a passing score of 80% on the quiz for module 1 to move to module 2 and so forth. And so it's designed, the 6 modules are designed to be taken in order that way. And know that if you want to access the videos themselves or any of the resources, You don't have to log in and take the course to get at those goodies. Those are right there on the ClassroomWise website. I personally love the videos. We're going to be looking at a couple of them today. They're so well done. So if you are in the position of putting together trainings for your educators or other school staff, and you need to go in there and just grab a video that you like or a resource that you like, please feel free to do that. And you can do that right on the ClassroomWise website. So everything that's inside the modules is right here. Okay, so that is kind of my real quick overview of what ClassroomWise is and where you can go to get it. If you have questions about ClassroomWise, please keep them coming in the chat, and our team is personing the chat box, and we'll make sure we get all your questions answered today. We are going to dive right in to Module 4 and 5. Module 4 is on understanding and supporting students experiencing adversity and distress generally. And Module 5 is more on the impact of trauma specifically and adverse childhood experiences on learning and behavior. So let's get started with a sneak peek of Module 4. So this module really starts out by reviewing typical child and adolescent development and behavior. And as we all know, it's really helpful to understand what's typical in order to identify students who may be experiencing adversity or distress. The module then reviews signs that students might need extra support, and then finally talks about how to link students and families to those supports. The module really notes that teachers are not expected to be acting as mental health professionals or to diagnose mental health problems, but the goal is really so that teachers can effectively respond to students in distress, because they're really the first to notice those signs of distress in students most often. The first video is actually of teachers describing the different ways that they let their students know that they are a safe and supportive person and are available to support students. So this module actually talks about many different things that teachers can do to promote healthy development for children and young adults. So really starts out the gate kind of talking about what is typical, what is healthy, what we can expect from most of our students. And it talks about things that teachers can do to really promote that healthy development. So for example, it talks about limiting criticism for elementary students, using feedback for middle school age students, and creating a sense of respect, trust, and honesty with our older students and our teenagers. There is actually resources for promoting healthy development in students of all age ranges, and that can be found in the resource collection. So it really kind of starts here with what is typical and healthy and how can teachers promote that. So then the module kind of goes into how knowledge of typical child and adolescent development is the foundation for being able to determine whether a student's behavior is developmentally appropriate or potentially cause for concern. So it talks about how larger environmental factors like systemic racism or other trauma can also impact development. And in the module, there's 3 resources for students aged 5 through 8, 9 through 12, and 13 through 18 to help teachers quickly recognize developmentally appropriate behaviors for your students. There's actually a really nice, it's like a 2-page resource, and I think my team can go ahead and put that resource in the chat if you want to download it and look at it. It's really nice. There's actually a, okay, so the module kind of talks about this, right? What's age appropriate and how are we getting in the range of something that may be concerning? One of the ways that it talks about this, so it kind of goes through the different age ranges, and then there's this interactive activity where the learner drags and drops several behaviors into either a concerning or a typical bucket. So it kind of looks like this on the left. I know it might be a little bit small. So this example is frequent refusal to go to school for all ages. And it asks the person taking the module to drag this into, is this concerning behavior or is this typical behavior? And so you can see then it comes up if it's, you pull that over to concerning, and it says something like, yes, while it's typical for students to occasionally object to waking up early or going to school, regular or ongoing refusal may be a cause for concern at all ages. So it kind of describes a little bit more why that behavior might be more concerning or typical. And then the next one you can see that comes up is afraid of the dark for ages 5 through 8, right? And so that one would go into the typical box and it'll provide feedback. So it has several prompts that way, just helping teachers think through what's kind of typical or concerning for the different age ranges. I also like that this module highlights how students' behaviors can be impacted by the teacher's own emotions and behaviors and their perception of student behaviors. So there's mention of research about the influence of teachers' biases based on their culture, history, and experiences that can influence how they perceive and respond to individual students. The module actually includes some guiding questions for teachers to reflect on as they consider students' behaviors and also kind of reflect on their own perceptions of students' behaviors. So the core of this module is really broken down into these 3 steps that it talks about. The 3 steps of identifying distress and linking. So the first step is to identify. The second step is talking with students, parents, and caregivers and professionals about any observations that teachers might have. And then the third step is linking students and families to formal and informal school and community supports. So identify, talk, and link. The module encourages teachers to identify student distress by being a good observer for red flags or changes, and really reminds teachers that they are so well positioned to do this and they are fully equipped to kind of play in this particular role. The module provides these 5 domains for teachers to consider to help them identify students in distress. So for each domain, the module presents some of the feelings, behaviors, or physical signs that teachers can look for. So it's kind of like signs and symptoms in each one of these categories. So let me just walk through one example so you can get a sense of it. The emotion regulation one refers to having the skills to control or manage one's emotions. It talks about how anxiety and depression are common emotion regulation disorders that can be experienced by children and adolescents, and that those students may exhibit a number of different kind of feelings, behaviors, and physical signs that you see listed here. And then for each domain, the module also includes a video where teachers discuss how these problems within this particular domain might appear in the classroom. So it's like, here's emotion regulation, here's what it is, feelings, behaviors, physical signs, and then we've got a video where you've got a teacher in their own words kind of describing how this particular domain might show up in the classroom. So let's take a quick look at a video that corresponds to this emotion regulation domain.
Some behaviors that I notice if a child is having problems regulating is lack of attention. So sometimes they are not paying attention, their mind is wandering, they're staring out the window. Those are the type of behaviors that they sometimes exhibit.
In the classroom, when students experience emotional dysregulation or other behavioral problems, I've seen this kind of play out in many ways. I've seen students that roll around the floor, that flip chairs, that tear things. I've seen students who just shut down. I see students who seemingly to someone else may be behaving normally as they normally would, but there are little adjustments in maybe their body language or their tone that you can notice. So I believe that it's important to get to know individuals and to understand what bothers them and how they react to certain things. And once you build that individual understanding, you can then read your students, and then you can work on ways to help them work through whatever problem may exist.
I'm imagining one student this past year that I had, they would start to tap their foot rapidly. And I was like, oh, and it took me a long time to identify that behavior as a triggering moment for them. Once I started to identify that and then connect it to the outbursts that this child would have, I would kind of walk over to them and be like, do you need this safe space? Are you safe? Are you feeling some ways? Like short, simple questions, and then allowing them again to know that if they need to take a break, they can.
So the focus on getting to know individual students to be able to notice when they're having difficulty or showing signs of distress is actually a theme that comes up in several of the videos and the content in this module, which I really like. And it just really stresses that by being available and looking for red flags or changes in student behaviors or emotions, and then by using a team approach, teachers are well positioned to identify students in distress. The module includes a brief list of questions to help teachers document their observations to really think through and determine whether a student's behavior is cause for concern. Okay, so it goes through that for each of those 5 domains. And then once teachers have identified a student with concerns or indicators of a mental health problem, the next step may be to talk with the student, a parent or caregiver, or a mental health professional. So we're going into step 2, which is talk. And the module provides tips and strategies for how teachers can communicate their observed concerns in a gentle and caring manner, such as asking open-ended questions, so the student or caregiver has the opportunity to share what they're thinking or feeling. You saw that one educator was saying, you know, I would just learn that I could check in with them with real brief, short questions, see how they're doing, if they're okay, and give them an option to take a break. And so it also includes tips like asking permission before providing information about available support and resources. And, you know, the module mentions in this that when talking with students about their mental health and well-being, a student may communicate information that leads the teacher to be concerned about their safety or someone else's safety. And it does address that directly with specific tips about how teachers can handle those situations. So there's a little bit of like kind of suicide awareness information that's embedded in here, and it has tips like letting them know that asking about thinking about ending your life or other direct questions is not going to increase risk. It encourages teachers to stay calm, listen to the student, respond non-judgmentally, make sure that supervision is provided, not promising to keep information secret, right? So all those kinds of general things that you would give about how to respond to a student in the moment who is sharing with you something that makes you real concerned about their safety or the safety of someone else, it does include some tips there. And I think it does a really nice job of kind of validating that can, you know, educators can be concerned about what to say or do in those situations and may not always feel fully prepared for that, and just gives them some quick tips about things they can do in the moment to help support students if that's something that they learn about in these conversations. Okay, then the third step, as I mentioned, is link. So once teachers identify a student in distress, they might need to link them to support in the school or community. It goes into kind of how teachers can equip themselves for this role by learning about different mental health professionals in their school and community, and even informal supports like our student clubs and mentoring programs and after-school groups to support student well-being. This is a screenshot of a part where it talks about 6 different types of resources. And I find sometimes that teachers are not always sure about kind of what are the similarities and differences of these different types of support. So I really like this part of the module because you can click on each one of these purple boxes and it opens up a box in the middle that explains what's kind of the typical role of that type of support or resource. You can see here that we've selected community health and mental health, and you can see the explanation there that it gives. So it really equips teachers to be thinking through kind of what are the potential supports they could have locally, and then to ask more questions if they're not sure about what those supports are. Along those same lines, the module then kind of wraps up with some questions that teachers can ask themselves to guide their actions when referring students for school-based mental health supports, as well as strategies for supporting students during treatment. So you can see like these few questions here, and encourages teachers to ask themselves questions like, how do I refer a student for counseling or therapy at my school? And there's several sub questions related to this that come up in the module. And then the other one is, what's the process for our school mental health professionals to even determine services for referred students? So if I refer somebody, how do the mental health professionals who I connect them to even know whether they need support? And then the third category of questions is like, how do I find out what happened after I made the referral? Is it appropriate for me to know if they got connected to treatment or how they're doing? And so it kind of has these open-ended questions, encouraging teachers to think through whether they know the answers to these things. And then if they don't, encourages them to go and find those answers, ask their colleagues, see if other teachers know the answers to these questions, because it may be that they need to just familiarize themselves with the school's crisis procedures and mental health referral protocols, so they feel really prepared to link them to a student in distress for needed supports. This could also be, I think, an opportunity if these types of questions are not clear to the teachers, to really prompt some questions in our local schools around what referral pathways may need some shoring up, or how do we be sure, especially as mental health providers, that our teachers know what to do and how to link students, because this piece of linking is going to look very unique depending on your local school systems, your constellation of services there, you know, the size of your system, who's on your teams. So usually this process of linking is pretty idiosyncratic to your school system. But by starting with these questions that teachers are asking themselves, it can really kind of open up the conversation to make sure that teachers are clear on how to link. Sometimes we can get into this a little bit more, but we started to talk this summer as we're reviewing Classroom-Wise about, you know, there may be opportunities to use the Classroom-Wise training module as a springboard for other conversations or other support. So maybe there's professional development in your schools already for teachers to let them know how to link students to services, right? So if you're having that conversation, you're kind of giving teachers some tips, that sort of conversation would actually go really nice hand in hand after they've watched this module. So just thinking about how you could kind of use these modules as a foundation for other conversations or things you need to prepare teachers. Okay, so we're going to take a quick pause here so I can be sure to get your thoughts and questions and ideas. I'm really curious how the Module 4 content we just talked about, how does it align with your priorities or existing initiatives in your schools? So is this consistent with training maybe that you already do in some other way? Is this consistent with a priority that you have for back to school, but maybe you don't have resources yet for it? Just curious your thoughts. Feel free to unmute and share aloud or type in the chat how this module might align with what you have existing. Is this the type of content that you would foresee would be helpful for your teachers this upcoming school year? Do you have other resources already kind of planned in place that would give them this information about identify, link, and refer? Great, so Katrina said that in Chattahoochee County, it's a smaller county. So this would be needed to link to student, yeah, school-based support, absolutely. You know, and I found at times when there's school-based mental health providers or supports, sometimes those teams are kind of put in the position of doing this type of training for their teachers, which makes really good sense, right? Because the mental health providers are the ones that actually have this content knowledge, but often they're doing their own, you know, presentation that they're pulling together, and maybe it's been shared and perfected over the course of time. So this could be consistent with something that you already do locally, maybe could help out some of those providers who, are maybe coming into this school system in a new way, might be turning over and needing to support teachers. So Katrina said a lot of teachers don't know what school-based supports there are. That's great. Not that that's great, but thank you for sharing that. And they also don't know what they can do. I think that's so true. And we find this to be the case for teachers, but also for students and families. The identifying piece is usually, I think, the easier part. And even we have many educators who are very well adept at talking with the students and the families to try to understand what's going on. But it's really that linking that people are not always sure what to do. Who do they call? How do they start that process, right? So this kind of a module could actually be a really nice springboard for having those conversations with your school teams and figure out, is there information that your school-based mental health teams know about how to link students to support that needs to be relayed to your teachers, that needs to be relayed to your parents and students? How do we get that information out there, right? Oftentimes as mental health providers, or even sometimes our school administrators, we know the pathways. We might know some of the resources and the directions and how to do that. But we really need to be kind of sharing that wealth of knowledge with everyone in the school community so we can, break down some of those barriers to access. One of the ways to do this is actually creating a school-based resource map. And there are actually a number of examples of these types of resource maps, from more involved to basic 2-pagers that can be found on the SHAPE system. I don't know if folks are familiar with the SHAPE system. I know our team can put that link in the chat. If you log into the SHAPE system, and you can just do that as an individual, or you can log in as a school or district, it's a free website where you can access a lot of school mental health resources. And if you go under the resource mapping section, there are some school-based resource maps that you can look at. And it's pretty simple. It's what you're thinking of. It's like, where are the places that you would go for student mental health support in our school or in our county? What types of services do they provide? To whom? How can you access them, right? And so a number of schools and districts have started doing these resource maps and just getting them out there so that people have more information about how to do that linkage. So if you think about, let me go back to this real quick. Think about these sorts of resources, right? What does this look like in your local school? Who are these people? What do they provide, and how can they be contacted for that linkage, right? A lot of times teachers may not know exactly how to get started in linking a student who has any sorts of concerns that they're worried about. So this is really an opportunity for good partnership between any of the mental health providers or the district student support leadership to make sure that our teachers know, our students know, and our parents know, where do you start? And as I said, this is very idiosyncratic by school. So some schools prefer, for example, for all referrals to start with the school counselor, and then the school counselor is the triage person. In other schools and districts, that's not the case. There might be a team that you refer to as like a centralized. In some places, you could refer to all 6 of these people separately, right? But we need to kind of have that information out there so people who are doing the linkages know how to build that bridge. Good questions, really good questions. So keep the questions coming. We're going to dive in to Module 5 next. And perhaps some of you who have, I know many school systems are increasingly focused on ensuring that teachers are equipped with information on the impact of trauma and adversity on learning and behavior. There's been a real surge of interest in being sure that our schools are trauma sensitive and trauma responsive. So if you have priorities and trainings in place, related to this topic. Hopefully you're going to see a lot of similarities with that. So I'm going to go through what Module 5 includes, and then we'll have a similar conversation, like how is this aligned with what you want to do or what you're currently doing for teachers, and how could you bring those things together? So the module starts by acknowledging that many students experience trauma or adversity. It explains that these experiences can shape brain and body responses and impact a student's ability to be available for learning in school. It helps teachers better understand child trauma and adverse childhood experiences generally. It does talk about the impact of these things on student learning, overall functioning, and just talks about how teachers can integrate trauma-sensitive practices in the classroom. The focus of this module is all about creating safe and supportive environments to support student success, even in the context of adversity. So I think it does a nice job of acknowledging that trauma and adverse childhood experiences are quite prevalent. And because of that, these trauma-sensitive teaching practices are things that we want to do for the entire classroom, right? This is sort of a universal level approach to being sure that we have safe and supportive environments for all students, because we understand, you know, how prevalent and impactful trauma and adverse experiences are on a number of our students. So this module begins by providing a definition of ACEs. So those of you who are in the mental health field are probably very well adept at this information and this this research on ACEs, but teachers maybe have never heard this before, right? So it's really kind of gives them a one-on-one, a 101 on what we mean by trauma and adverse childhood experiences. It talks about how prevalent these issues are among adults. It links to a really nice TED Talk video, if you guys haven't seen it, by Dr. Nadine Harris, that talks about how childhood trauma affects health across the lifetime. It's a really nice TED Talk. And the module then goes on to discuss kind of the lasting impacts of ACEs on one's emotional and physical health. So if you see on the left, it's a screenshot of, you know, all of the different types of lasting impacts that research has shown us can really be sequelae from adverse childhood experiences. But it also does a nice job at providing hope and explaining that there are many protective factors that teachers have a role in to prevent these long-term negative outcomes, and also to just make sure that there are ways that we're buffering students against the negative impact of adversity. And so it really highlights, like, yes, ACEs are very prevalent. Yes, there are a lot of negative impacts, and yet there's so much we can do to protect our students and really buffer the negative impacts of this and promote their resilience throughout these experiences. It talks about how trauma is just one type of adverse childhood experience. The different types of trauma are discussed clearly. There's an overview that uses the 3 E's from SAMHSA, if you're familiar with them. So it talks about the event, and then experience, how the event is perceived, and then the different types of effects that trauma can have. And the other piece that I like is there's a number of types of trauma that are discussed. So it explains that there's kind of singular traumatic events as well as recurring chronic traumatic events. It talks about complex trauma, and then it also talks about historical and intergenerational trauma. So it really kind of gives a broader lens on, you know, the different elements of trauma that students may have experienced that are impacting their learning. There's a really nice video here that it's about 3.5 minutes. So in the interest of time, I'm not going to show it, and I can come back to it if you want to see it, but it's on the website. This is a really nice one about the impact of trauma on the brain and learning. And so it kind of goes through a little bit of the brain science of what happens to our brains when we've experienced trauma. It talks about common reactions, our sort of fight, flight, or freeze, and how, you know, if you're facing a grizzly bear, then those 3 options may actually be very protective for you. But if you're responding to a trigger or a memory of something traumatic, then it's actually really going to get in the way of you being able to be successful and stay self-regulated at school. So it really kind of goes through the brain science piece in a way that I think is really accessible to teachers and really gives them a clear picture. So as educators, the trauma-informed lens for examining student reactions might mean a shift in the way that they're looking at and thinking about and viewing what's happening in their classrooms. And so the module kind of talks about that we might need to shift our lens a little bit. And when we see the various emotional, physical, behavioral, and cognitive reactions students have, to really understand that this could be in response to adversity and trauma. The module points out how different children might have different reactions. So, you know, it's not kind of a 1-to-1 ratio, you know, this situation happened to you and you're going to respond in this way necessarily, but really understanding that there's a whole variety of different risk and protective factors that any one individual has experienced. Positive school climate is also kind of called out in this section of the module as really important to enhance belonging, connectedness, sort of involvement with caring adults. There's a real thread throughout, I think, all of the modules in Classroom-Wise that focuses on the teacher-student relationship as a real protective factor to support student connectedness and success and mental health and well-being. And finally, the module discusses 6 key principles of a trauma-informed approach that's useful for all students. So again, really thinking about these approaches as something we do universally for all students in our buildings. And it includes, you know, creating physically and emotionally safe classrooms, being a trustworthy and transparent with students, encouraging peer support, engaging students as collaborators in shared decision-making, empowering students by giving them voice and choice, and also recognizing the cultural, historical, and gender issues that may contribute to adversity and trauma, including countering racism and discrimination in the classroom. There's actually a brief video on almost all of these, if not all of these, in the video library, which is really nice. And most of them are done from the perspective of teachers and talking about, you know, how they tackle each one of these approaches. So I think it's nice in that it makes it a little bit more concrete. It kind of takes it out of the hypothetical, which I think these terms, the way they are, sometimes feel kind of hypothetical, and it's not clear exactly how you do that concretely in the classroom. But the videos and the resources do a nice job of highlighting that. So as oh, and on that same note, on the right-hand side, you can see that safety is highlighted. And so there are some really concrete classroom strategies listed here, such as warning students before a change to the environment. The video clip on the bottom right actually shows how a classic one that I think many of us are familiar with is just like letting students know if you're going to dim the lights before watching a video, letting them know you're going to do a countdown of 5 before you turn the lights off, and then a countdown of 5 to turn them back on, so they can cover their eyes and not be, you know, jostled by that. And it's really brief, and it shows how the teacher does this in a really brief way, and it just kind of announces it to everybody before she dims the lights. So that's just like one example of a video that's on there. Other classroom strategies for safety are included and include some illustrations. So the recap here is that many students experience adversity or trauma, but these are strategies that are supportive for all students. Trauma and adversity, of course, can have a negative impact on students' ability to develop and their different behavior and their ability to learn. But again, it really underscores the power of the teacher's role and the positive impact that teachers can have in their students' life to really offer protection against these negative experiences by offering individual support to students and promoting school connectedness and positive school climate, which I personally appreciate sort of the hopeful and protective aspect of the module. I think that it can be difficult sometimes as learners to hear how prevalent trauma and adverse experiences are and all of the negative sequelae that it can bring in people's lives. It can be pretty tough to hear. So I think balancing that with a healthy dose of what we know we can do to protect our students and promote their resilience and being reminded about all the things we can do to be supportive to them, I think is a really nice balance that this module includes. Okay, so that was a quick kind of inside peek of what's in Module 5, very kind of trauma sensitive, trauma informed modules. Is this a topic that's aligned with current priorities in your schools? Do you have existing trainings that you do, or you're planning for this, or just curious how this particular content may align with priorities or existing initiatives in your schools? For those of you who may be educators who are calling in, or people who support educators, does it seem like this information would be valuable to them? Do you feel like this is information that they might already know, or would this be pretty new and useful? I know some school systems have really focused on this topical area. So depending on where you're coming from, maybe this is something that you've already done a good bit of training on. I know I work with some communities in the Southeast region that have experienced a number of natural disasters. And so this is a topic that they've done a lot of training on for their teachers, but I also work with other districts for whom this is all still quite new information. So I'm not sure where it lands exactly for your schools. So there is, I may be able to find it. If I think the other thing to keep in mind here is this is one module on this topic, right? So if this was something that you wanted to dive deeper into, or you felt like needed more dedicated time, you could pair this with some conversations with somebody from your mental health team, or maybe you have grade level meetings or PLC meetings or staff meetings, and you could kind of extend the conversation there. There also are, there's a free online modules in a number of places actually that go much more in depth into trauma-informed learning. It would take you more into like a several hour type of free online course for teachers. So there are other resources that are very aligned with this module that you could use to go deeper, and we'd be happy to connect you to that if you wanted. The one area that I will say, because sometimes we get questions about this, is there's not much in this particular module about teachers' own vicarious trauma or sort of secondary traumatic stress necessarily in this module. It does talk a little bit about kind of the teacher's role in influencing student emotions and behaviors, and has some reflective questions for them. But I know that there is a lot of concern, particularly after this past school year with the COVID pandemic, just making sure that teachers' own stress and vicarious trauma is being addressed and discussed. So that may be another area that's kind of aligned with this, it's related, that you may want to find complementary materials for. Okay, so we have a couple more slides with resources just as we're wrapping up here close to the top of the hour. But if there are other questions that you have about ClassroomWise, where to find this, what the other modules contain, please feel free to let us know. Oh, and I see Sarah's doing a great shout out in the chat. Yes, so please fill out our brief survey. It's always great to let you all know about this survey before the very top of the hour. It is actually so important for us that we get your feedback and letting us know how we did today, what else you need. I know the Southeast MHTTC is so dedicated to making sure that we're putting together learning content and materials that's really helpful to you. All of you on this call are extremely busy individuals, and we want to make sure that this time is well spent. We do look at every last response on these surveys and we take them super seriously. So if you could go into that link that Sarah just put in the chat and spend a few moments there, let us know what you thought. We would greatly appreciate that. Okay, so you may, this ClassroomWise content may be reminding you of other trainings and things you know of. I know Sarah can actually put in the chat for us a great resource that has other related trainings for teachers on mental health that you might be thinking about. So sometimes we get questions like, how is this similar or different from youth mental health first aid and Cognito? And there's a lot of different types of mental health trainings for teachers out there that are available. Some of them are free, some of them are not free. They are all a little bit different. So this resource that we just put in the chat was actually an environmental scan that was done before ClassroomWise was developed to just see what's out there in the field. So if you want a good kind of grid to do a comparison of other things that are out there in the field, I encourage you to check that out. ClassroomWise was developed specifically to add value in this space for mental health training for teachers in a number of ways. One of the ways that ClassroomWise is designed to add value is that it's free. There are a number of trainings that are free in this area, but not very many. So we wanted to make sure that there was a free training out there. It's also self-paced. We know that everybody learns differently and that you can have a more accessible learning and retention for diverse audience if they can go in and do it on their own time. So this kind of avoids you, having everybody kind of learn at the exact same time and, et cetera. Some people are faster, want to take more time, et cetera. The duration here is 5 to 6 hours. So it's 6 modules. We've estimated with all of our pilot administration and everything that folks have been doing it in 5 hours, it may be up to 6 hours. So if you're budgeting time for people and thinking about professional development days, you may want to just go ahead and build in 6 hours for them. It's around 5 to 6. The timing is really important here because with it being online and free, this isn't like a standalone training that you have to schedule and put on the PD calendar. We know educators have very, very full plates. And so this is something that's available 24/7, 365 days a year. I think we're all in an environment now where we're having to get our professional development done in a variety of flexible and virtual ways, right? So although some schools may be planning in-person professional developments for a certain number of days in the upcoming year, other schools may be looking for more flexible options. I'm sure that on election day, teachers may prefer to do an online self-paced training from home instead of having to go into the school if it can be avoided. So just giving some flexibility in that way. And it is interactive. It's designed to be engaging and accessible. The priority was really to make it as accessible to as many people as possible. The other thing that I'll just mention is this was really developed with a lot of input from the field, including a number of educators and students. So it's really developed by educators for educators. So there are a number of mental health trainings out there available that are not necessarily developed with educators' input or specifically for an education audience. So this is really tailored for this audience. And we encourage you to let us know, based on your experience of prior implementation efforts, like what you foresee as being successful for classroom-wise rollout and implementation. I know this is a lot of information to take in today, but we really do want to hear from you as you're looking deeper into this resource. What do you think is going to be most helpful for your implementation? And what do you need? So if there are implementation supports that you're looking for, anything that we can do at the Southeast MHTTC to make this easier and more compatible with everything you have going on in your schools, please don't hesitate to let us know. Here's our evaluation survey again. If you've not poked into that and gotten started, I encourage you to please do that. That's also a survey that is required by SAMHSA, so we want to be sure that we can demonstrate the value of these events to our funders, who we're very grateful for. Okay, I have 2 more resources to share with you that folks ask about very frequently. So before I let you go, we want to give you these, and I know that our team is going to be putting them in the chat for you. This is a 2-pager overview of ClassroomWise. So a lot of times folks have said, okay, I like the 6-minute intro video, but a lot of my decision-making leaders really want to see something in print that's brief, that says exactly what this whole training package is. So if you're looking for kind of a quick 2-page overview of what ClassroomWise is, this is the resource that you want to go to. Again, if this is something that looks like it could be of use in any way to your local schools, don't feel like you've got to be the one retelling all this to your colleagues. Please use the resources that are available on the website. They're designed to make it easier for you. There's also a 1-pager of the course objectives. I really like this because if you do have existing mental health trainings for your teachers that are scheduled, you can kind of do a crosswalk between what you have and what classroom-wide includes, and maybe do some alignment. Because if you're deciding to do classroom-wise for your teachers this year, there's likely an opportunity to take other mental health trainings off their plates, right? So if you feel like, for example, teaching mental health literacy and reducing stigma really covers all the things that you tend to cover in some other training, then maybe you can kind of align their PD calendars. So if you want kind of a quick snapshot of the goals and learning objectives, please check this 1-pager out. And I should have mentioned before as well, you know how I said that you don't have to go in and take the modules to see all the videos and the resources, because those videos and resources are on the ClassroomWise website. There's also a full transcript that you can download for every module. So if you want to go in and take a sneak peek of like, let me go back to that module 4 and see if it really includes whatever, go get the downloaded transcript, and it's a PDF, and you can just do a scan, and it basically walks you through all the content, where the videos are positioned, etc. So if you're in kind of a coaching consulting role, if you're a mental health professional, you don't need to take the course itself, those transcripts can be really useful. So we invite any additional Q&A, as always, that you have. I see some things coming in the chat, so I'm just going to check. Okay. Great. Here are upcoming office hours. So we've had a number of office hours this summer, all about ClassroomWise, because it is a new resource that was just released earlier this summer. We know it likely aligns with some of the content that you might need for your teachers in the upcoming school year, but we didn't want you to send you off to figure it all out on your own. So that's why we're offering these office hours, so you can come, pop in, get your questions answered, take a sneak peek, and think about how it aligns for you locally. So next week, we're going to be diving into the 6th and last module, which is Classroom Strategies to Support Students. Dr. Nancy Lever is going to be your presenter and moderator for that session. And so if there are classroom strategies that you're already working with your teachers on, or maybe you're looking to add to your teacher's toolbox on those real concrete strategies that they need to support students, please come to this session next week so you can see a sneak peek of what some of those strategies are, and think about whether this Module 6 could be useful for your teachers. Then we are kind of capping off the end of our summer office hours about ClassroomWise on Tuesday, August 10th. It'll be a 90-minute session. We're going to talk about implementation planning, a shared learning summary. So this is really going to be tailored to your needs. As Tara said in the chat, please feel free to make requests of us, ask questions. You can do that in the anonymous survey. You can reach out directly to Tara. You can register for it and add your questions in there. We're always looking to hear what questions are kind of coming from the field and what your needs are. If you are planning on doing ClassroomWise this year, please let us know. We'd love to talk with you about what your plans are, and we'd love to have some folks actually share on August 10th what their plans are for rollout of this. And with that, we can conclude today's presentation. I'm so grateful for everyone's attention and participation today. We are also so grateful to SAMHSA for funding this work and developing this beautiful resource that can be shared with the field. And so don't hesitate to let us know what you need as you dive into ClassroomWise and think about its potential fit for your local schools. Have a great rest of your day, and we look forward to being in touch.